So we're going to sit here today and we're going to discuss wonderful Backlash, correct?
Hey, it was a great set.
That's the third release, correct? Yes, third release.
Correct. There was Premiere, fully loaded, and then Backlash, which actually input Backlash decks. Amazing enough, this game was played without a Backlash deck to start.
It was. This is way before my time because I came into this game right around Vengeance. So that's when I came into it. And even then I still wasn't into it. I treated the product like trading cards.
Yeah.
And I've told a story before where I my first box I ever bought, I opened and I got a hot pack out of it, and I pulled a Pele made out of that hot pack. And I think it was, I want to say they were Gopola. That
Oh, that's a name for the past.
Yeah, or it was either him, Vic, or one of the other Armenian guys that was there when I opened it and bought it off me, and I had no idea what to charge for it. I go, oh, all these shiny cards in one pack. It's like that. Like, oh, I'd be interested in that card. And it was a
Oh,
Pele
it must be
mid.
that easy to pull these cards, obviously.
And I go, okay, well, and in my mind I'm thinking, oh God, girls always sell better than guys. So $8 for girls and $5 for guys. $5. All right, I'll buy it. I had no idea.
Of course. And then obviously he knew you had no idea about it. That's why he scooped
Of course. The guys who, when I first got into the game, so the guys who taught me how to play the game really took advantage of the fact that I knew nothing about CCGs at all. And so I could never win. Even when I thought, like, hey, I'm doing really well. I'm getting this thing called fortitude in the board. My moves are going through. I'm doing great. I'm stopping shit, but how am I still losing? And it wasn't until Baron showed me how to play the game at the Gen Con in Anaheim that I was like, these guys have been taking advantage of me. These other small cards, these commons and uncommons, they're pretty good cards. They're just as good as ultra rares in some cases, So I had no experience with this Backlash release or any of those releases prior, so I have no idea about this stuff. So my whole life has been about, I have a Backlash deck. So I don't know the world before Backlash.
Before Backlash, it was literally the Wild West. If you basically going first was everything. So Triple H, though not a very big superstar, big hand size was worth it. Austin was the man. A-bomb, H-bomb, they were called. They would just go like kick. If it goes through, knee smash, knee smash, knee. Oh, pedigree win, or Austin, or in Austin's
We're getting that pump kick open hand.
Yeah, but back then there wasn't even a pump kick. Pump kick didn't happen until Mania, so it was literally just like really bad, like 0 for 5s, 0 for 5s, like headlock takedown, which is 0 for 5 grapple, kick, super kick. Those are your starting like zeros, unless you were like an all grapple deck, then you did like double leg takedowns, and none of these were like can only be they're literally like 0 for 3, 0 for 5, and they didn't really have like any reversal restrictions. You just played them straight up, and that's just how the game was played. And games took less than 15 minutes, and it reminded me much of a Revolution game. You'd have loved it. It was like, oh, this is very simple. We just ramp fortitude, and it's actually a back and forth match. And then pre-match came, and then a Backlash and pre-match and mid-match, and it was still really fast. You'd like it. It was Revolution because it was just 3 and 3. Very simple, and fans love an underdog. First and only card that was ever banned, because there was no ace reversals. If you were behind, you would just elbow the first turn. Fans love an underdog. Plus 8 fortitude. There's no fortitude surge yet. You could just go off, and it was only available for lower superstar value characters. You couldn't pack it in the rock as well. Most of the time, you wouldn't be able to play it. And then they're like, oh, this is too strong. We have to ban this. And then back again, higher superstar value people reigned, like the Rock and RTC, which, hey, is in this set as well. So we can talk about that.
This is the release that first introduced the back, like you said, pre-match and mid-match cards. And
there wasn't really much to play. Like, if you look at the pre-match and mid-match back then, it was literally like title belts before were prizes that there was no pre-match phase. You just revealed them. You got like, if you had all 3 belts, you got like 6 superstar value. So if you were Austin, you had like a 11 superstar value. So you always win first. So, but then they said, all right, no, these are pre-match objects. You have to play them in the pre-match as well. And they're really
because the first runs of the IC World, those ones told you that you put them in your ring areas like that with your superstar basically.
Yeah,
you changed the wording on that when they did a second version of those.
Correct, because there was like people would just literally be fighting to be like who was first, and that's literally what the game was until Backlash came out. They're like, okay, well, these should just be pretty much objects, and then they became that. So they could use it with Don't Mess with the Champ, which became a huge staple in this meta. Premier WWE Superstar wasn't that big because you couldn't balloon your superstar to like 20. but that became one of the bigger cards as well. Domestic Champ, Backlash. Those are the main like staple you would see in your pre-match and mid-match. There really wasn't much else to use. You like look and go, No Mercy, like that's a 2042, 2542 action. I forget which, but it's a win more card. It wasn't really like a card that really affected the game that much, as opposed to Don't Mess the Champ or Dirty Low Blow that just got you on the board.
So this release introduced for the first time also tag teams.
Yes.
Is this where the release that also introduced the tag team format?
No, the tag team format already existed before. Surprise Hit was in Fully Loaded, and then they had errata that as well, just because everyone would just use like RVD to like just throw Surprise Hit, and you couldn't surge it because it.
Well, RVD's as a Mania release.
Yeah, as a Mania.
So I'm talking from
but
Backlash backwards.
Yeah, there was already a tag format in place before that because there were cards with tag logos before. But this was just the way that they could actually input tag teams, and they just did the whole set around of Hardys, Dudleys, Edge and Christian, RTC, and actually have tag teams that can only play tag team cards, like Little She-Devil, another amazing card in this set that pretty much most tag teams were playing at the time. And it's still really great if you could pack it, but it just fell out of favor in Virtual, which I don't know why, because a plunging card or draw 3 sounds really great to me.
So in this release, they only introduced 4 starter decks.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 booster superstars. So the starter decks.
Degrees and strengths.
Yeah.
Starters, yeah.
And the 6 starter decks like that. So let's talk about the Dudley Boys. What was good with them? What was bad about them?
As a guy who mained Dudleys for forever, I mean, they weren't that great. Obviously, they were just like, hey, I can search for a foreign object. Great. The trick was getting to 3D, but even then, if the person was smart, they would just, you can possibly play 3D. I'm just not going to play maneuvers or maneuvers that get around 3D because I just don't want to die. But getting forward to them was actually kind of rough. They had like really cool strike reversals, Bubba Punch, Bubba Drop, but they really had no way of getting on the board. Usually, you were just stuck like blindly throwing moves and hoping it sticks. Devon was cool in that you'd play maneuver draw card, and there was like really cool, interesting things you could do with that slingshot on the post. But again, both gimmicks. And Bubba was one of those really honorable mentions that got second in qualifier because he could draw his whole deck and play Premier Raw and Scoop. I think it ran into a highlight of the night at a qualifier. But aside from that, they were just kind of like, hey, these are cool superstars, but nothing like game breaking that really saw much in terms of like longevity. There was a lot of cool things they could do, but nothing in terms of like, hey, this is some like staple that we have to really deal with, unlike some of the other superstars in this set. They were fun, like pretty much same thing as the Hardys. I mean, they had really cool things going on that are very niche, but yeah, nothing really great that stood out other than they had a big 3D reversal, which suited them.
3D is basically their best card.
Yeah, but the problem is getting to 27 in the first
point.
place. Yeah, or 28.
So not to take away from the fact that we're breaking down Backlash release, at what point did the Dudley Boys ever get anything that made them better later on?
They kept getting a lot of stuff. Brothers from Another Mother was great.
They did a couple throwbacks for them as well.
Yes. When Bubba got his throwback superstar is when that's when he actually was feasible.
I'm just talking about Dudley Boys. We're just talking about Dudley Boys.
So, Dudley Boys. Nothing really. I mean, TLC was much more interesting when they got the TLC throwback. But after that, they still were never like great. I mean, Buddha Dudley, I tried to play Dudleys so many times. There's only so many things you can do with that. Like just throw foreign objects and maybe do a weird, bust first blood match. But then you wouldn't get TLC, so you'd be like stuck going, crap, you can't get both unless you do some weird raw roulette, and even then you're like putting too many eggs.
Did they get fixed more?
Don't have enough fucks to give.
Did they get no fucks to give? Exactly. Did they get fixed a little more in virtual though?
They did. The Brothers Forever card helped them get on the board, and that's all they really needed. Their biggest problem was always just getting on the board, and Brothers Forever basically helped them just get, and all the Dudley Boys just somehow get fortitude and get started, which was always their problem. They got like the pre-match eventually, Green Dudleyville. Dudley Boys have always had like their great. They've always had their great like 3D trademark finish. It's a reversal. They got a bunch of great, amazing mid-match. The problem is their mid-match is very packed, but their WWE USA helps with that. But in the end, they could just never get on the board, and it was just really like, oh, I have all this cool stuff I want to do, but it doesn't matter if I'm still at 0 or 2 for the whole game. So their virtual card really did help them, and obviously just getting on the board.
And then as individual superstars, because I kind of want to do each deck by itself and then do the
Sure.
individuals. But we've already kind of talked about all Dudley stuff. So, but the Bubba and Devon individually still weren't all good themselves either individually.
No, they were just more gimmicky. They were fun. You're just like, oh, I'm playing a Devon. Okay, I'm just going to smash this. Unless he's got some weird like, oh, I play a bunch of slingshots. So basically, oh, I run out all your reversals from hand. I play slingshot converters from hand. Oh, sweet. So I just play them all, draw, play up to like, 24 to win. That's the only deck of archetype I ever saw with Demon that actually was like, oh, that's fun, but it's really dumb. That's all the best you can come up with, then it's not that great. Yeah, his cards were not anything to sing home about either. That was the other problem. I mean, doing the Devon, it took the throwbacks to make testify. You're 30. When does Demon ever get 30? So, or 25 or whatever it was. So I mean, yeah, pick up 5 cards, but yeah, his cards just were never that great. And Bubba, same thing. When he, like I said, that ability was great, but then what? So just can't get off the ground usually.
Okay, let's go to Edge and Christian.
Edge and Christian was one of those meh superstars. They used like a bunch of cards that made you discard to draw, which sounded like really cool at the time, but there was a lot of already maneuvers that let you draw. European uppercut, double leg takedown. So so they got to use cards like Giant Swing, which no one ever used, but they got to draw 2 cards instead. So they were more niche, but they didn't set the world on fire either. Even when they got their mid-match, You Think You Know Me, where they got to draw 2 from it, it still didn't set the world on fire. People like, they have like really cool like cards that did a lot of like very interesting things. But yeah, that ability just, people thought it would do more, and it just really didn't. It allowed them to to draw cards.
Okay. What would from Backlash? From Backlash, what would be their key cards, both superstar specific wise and non-superstar specific?
Non-superstar specific was basically anything that allowed them to draw instead. So giant swings, like
sure.
Anything like that normally made them discard. And they had a lot of more interesting cards, but in the end, the superstars like Concerto I thought was a horrible trademark as well. So I never was really enamored by this set. I just looked at it and was like, okay, cool. Like nothing really just stood out to me. That's Edge and Christian. You never heard about them. They never won anything. It was just one of those weird superstars like, hey, we just wanted to use some cards that no one ever sees, and you can throw them in Edge and Christian and then they'll work.
What about the individual boosters on those guys?
Now that's something else. Edge has one of those long-lasting, like, it became meta through everything because people would start paying really high superstars. Okay, great. I'll just play Edge. Now I still go first, and I have this humongous hand, and doesn't matter what you do, I can just smash. Through mini iterations, through virtual, through classic, Edge has just been one of those, oh, crap, I didn't see an Edge deck coming. I am really screwed. Or if you didn't see it coming.
Yeah, I lost many times too. When I started playing, I lost many times to Edge decks using Test of Strength. And
oh yeah, amazingly enough, right? Edge decks were just one of those interesting things that if you didn't see it coming, you're like, especially between big slides, and then when I'm the underdog, fans love an underdog, the aforementioned band card. Edge just had a lot of like really cool tricks. They can just get off the ground with pump kicks, drawing 20 cards. You're like, oh look, pump kick, there you go, and now I have everything I need. Obviously one of his big cards, You Think You Know Me, also just helps, where you're just like, oh great, he gets an omniversal, and he's like got 20 cards, and he's got like 3 fans of an underdog to get on the board, and pump kicks. Like, yeah, that's a lot going on. Christian, I think, just got overshadowed by Edge in that sense. There were some Christians
isn't
at
that
the
kind
time
of the case in real life too?
Yeah, that's true too. Christian was was one of those weird archetypes during the set where like, oh, people can't draw, so that's very interesting. And you have Christian Shades, which are great, which was basically the reason why you would play Christian. You just stop actions like, oh, just Shades, no, and just fine. He just didn't really set the world on fire again. He won a couple tournaments here or there, but it was never like anything big. He was at least, I think, better than all Dudley versions, and I think better than the Edge and Christian team, but definitely still in the shadow of Edge, which, as you
So
said,
at this point right now, from what we've already talked about, then Edge is going to be number 1 so far with Christian number 2.
So far,
Yeah.
but there's
Well,
still
trust
like
me, I know we're getting to the big ones here.
we're getting
soon.
there. We're getting there. Okay.
Hardy Boys. Hardy Boys as a deck, and then their individual boosters.
Okay. Hardy Boys is a deck. It's high risk. You basically anything around high risk, it's a problem. Like, because you have to, especially in an era where you have to play a maneuver, and it's pretty much going to be like pretty much virtual now. It's like everything is protected. It's like can only reverse from Marshall, cannot be responded to. Whereas in this era, it's like you have to play maneuver straight up, and then that's when you get to play a high risk. Whereas if you put like 10 high risks, it's really hard to like set them up. So they were already pigeonholed as well. They're the Hardys. They have to be high risk. So that was going to be the big problem. Like when they came out, they were just as kind of lame as the Dudleys, except for they didn't have any big reversals. So in the end, they were pretty much just like meh. I'd rather play with someone that went first or had a big superstar value with like really good superstar cards versus the Hardys, especially, which I think was the worst of the 3.
I was going to ask you, if right now they're probably the worst of the 3 we've talked about so far.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Honorable mention to Matt in a Box, which eventually, when Hell in a Cell eventually came out, actually became like a very usable superstar because you throw a box out and then just basically recover everything because it was a lot easier for Matt Hardy to do so. And Jeff, it took him to get a 0-for-3 Omni Reversal in Virtual to make him any good, which tells you a lot. He needed a lot of help, even though they all eventually got that mid-match Live for the Moment and then Team Extreme. They still were never setting the world on fire. They always needed help back then, and they eventually got it. I know Justin took Jeff Hardy to like a forward 2 at a Gen Con over here, but even then, and he beat a Los Guerreros at the time at Insurrection, but they were never anything to write home about.
Yeah, but by the time Los Guerreros came out, it's like that. He had more tools to play with. I'm just, the Backlash era, it's like that. Doesn't sound like they did very well at all.
Yeah, they didn't. You played him because you liked him, and then that was it.
That sounds like it's almost like a release of like that. They made superstars to try to make tag teams, but then they all make them said you like them. That's the reason why you played them.
Yeah.
Other than this last deck here, so like that's gonna be pretty powerful here. We're talking about Right to Censor now.
Art to Censor. So the reason why Art to Censor was very good, even before they got censorship match, was Right to Interfere. A lot of the times they just didn't have to play maneuvers. You don't have to play zeros. You just sit there and go, okay, I have a 0-for-7. I'll let you get forward 2, then I'll have 7. That's insane. You can put like a couple zeros. They're a great ability to cycle through in case you need to find them. But the main mate at the time was, if you played at that time, other than clutch, apply, maintain, which was a thing. You could clutch, apply, maintain for like the short time when the set first came out, because there was some dumb ruling like, oh yeah, you can still clutch, apply, even though apply copied clutch, it says can't play maintain. Oh, apply doesn't have the text anymore, but I could, it was something dumb, and it was next eventually. The main deck was literally rock pretty much rock, turn the tide, half-hour suplex. With the Brahma Bull, where you just sit there and just go like, all right, I eat up all your maneuvers. I still have a 30-card hand, turn the tide into like a 60 damage maneuver, and there was nothing that reversed unreversibles at the time. RDC just said, no turn the tides, ever. Just discard a card, no turn the tide. And that just stopped everything. So it was like the perfect, like made it to like people who just sat there with turn the tides or like get crowd support or any great, face action, just said, offer handshake, no, none of that. You're not playing those. So if you could stomach playing something of a pretty much a control deck that eventually, once you got on the board, you can start like doing like plunging and getting really big moves off, then RGC was great. It was the perfect mate at the time, and it won pretty much most of the tournaments. And then it got censorship match afterward, not in the set, but they became one of those like really, really great superstars that had to get like one of those silver bullets where like everything in their ringside just got removed from the game. I think it was backstage politics. But yeah, that was definitely the best, the strongest at the time when it came out, and then eventually had to fall off a cliff because it was that stupid.
Yeah, I just building them from an all-access standpoint was kind of fun though too, when that came out.
The best thing about RTC was that it actually rewarded the players who were as meticulous and did the Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours of raw deal, in that if you knew what your opponent was doing, and when censorship match came out, you could just go, okay, I know you win with like your 3D, right? All right, or if you're Raven's Playground, like, no, whatever superstar card that you think is amazing, I'll play against that. You cannot play that card. And they're just like, wait, what? Like, yeah, you can't play your 3D. You can't play, and you're like, wait, what? I can't play this one card? And you're like, yeah, sorry. And that just like stopped everything. And you're like, well, but that rewarded the RTC player who was smart enough to know what you were doing.
Yeah.
If they didn't, you were just like, I used to see like people who didn't understand right to censor. They would censor like break the hold, and they would play submissions, and we're like, what? No one even practiced break the hold, at least in this area. So it was just really weird. And then later they would do forward to search. They fence them and underdog. Like, that at least makes more sense. So, but the most bang for your buck for RTC was when censorship match, like I said, wasn't in the set, but that's when they knew, like, all right.
When did censorship match come out? The following release?
I'll say Mania, and that was the last time I think they got a card. But yeah, that's when RTC was running wild and actually just really strong. You saw on RTC, they're like, ugh, this is going to be a very interesting game when I can't do what I want to do, at least if the RTC player was smart enough.
You're kind of hoping the person who's playing RTCs like that is just not familiar with your deck.
But yeah, if you're an RTC player, you should be smart enough to realize what's going on, or else you should be playing another deck. So,
were you involved at all in any play testing at all with any of this stuff?
Oh no, I didn't get into any play testing until after Virtual. I basically got into the game right around Fully Loaded when it started, and I was just like a noob like everyone else. I had to sit through many times getting Turn the Tide into half-hour suplexed. I had to run into an RTC deck. I played Dudley's, which tells you just how bad of a player I was. I just got stomped. But in like regular random like games that weren't against The Rock, that weren't against RTC, I held my own because I was like, oh, this is fun. I have strike reversals. I can like chain them into like something. So it wasn't that bad. But yeah, I had no interest in playing like back then. I had no interest in playing like the really strong decks. I just wanted to make Dudley's work, which I never could, because turns out
you're a fan.
I was a fan. So
I think it's what attracts people to the game who are wrestling fans, because they can play as their favorite character if they wanted to. You know, someone's like, oh, I'm a Chris Jericho fan, or I'm a Rock fan. Like, I can play that deck. I'll give it a try.
Yeah, and that's where, you know, people can just like pick up a Triple H starter and just go, oh yeah, that was the appeal when Albert is the one who got me into the game. He's like, hey, you should check this game out. Okay. So, of course, I bought 10 Triple H Jericho because, well, Triple H was on it, and Jericho, sure, why not? And I ended up using Jericho as a main for a while until I ended up having a lot more fun with the Dudleys, just because Dudleys, hey, great.
Taking a step down, I see.
Yeah. I always try to make it hard on myself, and then, you know, much later I realized I'd rather just...
Hey, you know what? Big rewards, you know, I mean, big risk, big rewards, man.
Yeah.
So if I can win with the Dudley boys, man, I get bragging rights.
Yeah, I think the closest I got was like I think second in the tournament, just because Dudley's, a lot of people didn't know what they did because no one ever played them. They're like, they just threw strikes blindly. I'm like, that's dumb, because they have like three technically really huge strike reversals. People would just throw strikes. I'm like, oh sweet, just climb the ladder with those. So the only main thing about Backlash that was it'd be remiss to not talk about it, was that Brahma Bull was the one card that just changed everything. Brahma Bull with The Rock, and that started that whole like sponge.
When did Brahma Bull come out?
This one, Backlash.
In Backlash, okay. So he was ultra rare in that.
Other than China, which was the first like, you know, super stall deck, which, oh my God, China's just so stupid. But at the time, because reversing from it was considered reversing from hand still too, which they've changed that since. But Brahma Bull was like, oh, a lot of people would just pack like 20 zeros. All right, they all do 1 damage. And then you had to like really change your deck building to not do that. There's a lot of deck builds would be like a lot of zeros and a lot of 2s, because there was like European Uppercut, 2 for 5, draw a card, or Spinning Heel Kick, 2 for 5, discards a card. You wouldn't really get into like 10s, because you can be Dirty Low Blow into 0 for 2s. Then The Rock just changed everything. Like if you faced The Rock and you had nothing but zeros, like, well, this game's over. I can't do enough damage to kill him. So it literally changed the way, like, if you wanted to win a tournament, you knew you had to go through a Rock. So, all right, can I beat a Rock? No. All right, this deck doesn't work. So I have to think of something else.
When you played turns that time, did you see a lot of Rock decks, like a lot of guys were packing Rock?
There was a lot of people. Rock's usually won. Once they were able to sort out like how they were to win, when they figured out China's half-hour suplex was good enough, they just had to wait long enough. JR Styles slobber knocker so that they couldn't play actions. Rock would just sit behind and just reverse everything or just eat everything until they could turn that half-hour suplex. They didn't have managers though. That was the only saving grace. So the trick was if you went above the Rock and Fortitude, you needed to be able to kill him because you couldn't do it with actions because they would have JR style slobber knocker out. So that's what you had to do. But at least RTC could because they could do like throw with like big plunging into big moves. That's why RTC seemed to be like the perfect counter at the time. But that was it. There really wasn't any other decks at the time other than China because China could just stop everything you did with the ability. So it was like this really weird triangle of just hell. If you weren't playing China or RTC or The Rock, there really wasn't much to do in this like era. And then so
it sounds like was Backlash itself as a release, was it even really widely accepted? Like people liked that release?
I mean, it was cool in that it gave like people like a Backlash they could play with, which is very interesting. But since there was barely any pre-match and mid-match, it really didn't change too much, honestly. It really didn't change too much in the game. Like pre-match cards had like barely any text. You could play it. You were just like, oh, what does that do? Oh, I look at your hand. Okay, that's nothing. Okay, fine, no big deal. It was like pre-matches were just like literally take a minute, which sounds like a foreign and crazy idea, but it didn't really detract or add to the game because it was just really quick. Three pre-match done. Sweet, let's go. It didn't add any time to the game. Games were still fast until The Rock and China and Rumble and RTC. Those were the decks that defined the era, and it was not a good era.
No.
It took a while for it to get out of that because that's where it came from, like a very fun game in Premier and Fully Loaded, where it was just like two guys going back and forth, but the higher superstar value you guys winning, to this where it was like stall decks were reigning until it's all about the game and
so Backlash probably pretty much introduced or really capitalized off of stall decks.
Yeah, so that's where stall decks really were able to like sink in and take, especially Brahma Bull, especially RTC. China more of a sense in later, but yeah. But those were the best. That was the era. It was not fun unless you played those decks, and that's when you're like, okay. It was still like the haves and the have-nots still.
Where's the fun in going into a tournament of 20, 30, 40 people and like 15 of them are playing the same freaking deck?
Well, that's why you had to like, okay, if the guy who always played Rock is going to play, like, well, I have to try something else, and maybe someone can knock him out. But I mean, it was the end. It was always like those two had to like knock each other out, and then you still have to deal with one of them. So, yeah, it was a very not interesting, fun time. When it first came out, though, before anyone figured it out, it was fun. Everyone was playing everything, and those are the best tournaments. X-Pac being able to shovel everything back, Foley being able to shovel everything back. That was great. You're like, oh man, this is very interesting until the meta sorted itself out, and then you're like, oh, this meta is not very fun at all. It wasn't very open, and that was the problem. But that was the set, and that's how it was at the time. And at least when you weren't playing those three superstars, it was still a lot of fun. Going against a Hardys or Dudleys, going, I don't remember what this does, but yeah, it'll be fun to play against and see what happened. So it was still fun until you ran into those, like the top three decks that were amazing enough, more stall than anything else, or RTC, which was its own. You could build it in many different ways.
Was there anything in Backlash that's not superstar specific that was needed in the game at that time? Like not
oversell, no sell was a very good one. Oversell being able to stop any maneuver was especially clutch. Clutch apply gave heal something that it didn't have. It had already managers, but that was it. But then it gave its. But at the time, face was basically just bring it, and that was basically all it needed. Oh, and get crowd support, which was huge to getting like pretty much an unreversible maneuver off her handshake. It finally gave heal something to actually go with their low blows, clutch, and apply. No sell as well to a lesser extent, but no sell was given to guys that didn't really need it. If you looked at it, it was like guys that were just like Austin. Yeah, he was already winning tournaments. Taz from the last one was already winning tournaments. But oversell I think was the key card that basically just stopped any maneuver. Like, all right, your turn is done. I'm going to draw two. I'm going to keep going, but you get to keep that fortitude. So at least it gave decks a way to at least get a turn. Because a lot of decks before, in the fully loaded era, they could just do one turn like scoop you, if they had like a good enough hand. Like especially because there was barely any way to reverse a high risk except for overturning like a 0 for 1. I think roll out of the way. Yeah. There wasn't really another way to reverse it. Another underappreciated card is when you thought you had all the answers, because it stopped trademarks. Because there really was no way to stop trademarks.
I think that's a great card. It's actually, even to this day, it actually does well.
When I ran into it in virtual, I remember I think Justin played at one of the Adam Kreitz played 2 when you thought he had all the answers. So I see how it feels. I was like, my mind was just blown. I was like, what the hell just happened? Like, oh, you reversed it twice from Backlash? I'm like, oh yeah, that card exists. Oh, that card's good. Damn it. It's still great. It's a 0 fortitude versus trademarks, and at the time, trademarks were pretty much unstoppable. Especially if you were a face, you couldn't stop them because only managers were a heel card, and a lot of people still preferred face over heel. So trademarks were still as strong as it could be without throwing diversion into it. So, when you thought you had all the answers, still amazing. Very underrated. Even today, you could still just throw it in and just go oh yeah, stop any trademark.
Yeah, I don't think it's packed as often. It's like that, but when someone does pack it and throws that, you go, shit, I forgot about that card.
Yeah, if you pack that card, you'll get to use it pretty much every game. That's the thing, especially in Classic, you're going to get to use it. So, I mean, it's if you can find room for it, that's the problem.
Even that release also brought Backlash, the reversal itself.
Backlash the card, yeah, it allowed everyone to at least have a turn. Again, same idea that a lot of the decks were just like a Triple H and Austin were meant to scoop or at least get to 20 to 30 fortitude turn 1, which tells you a lot about the game at one point. It was a lot of fun, but at least if you got scooped, you're like, all right, let's try that again. Let's see if I don't get scooped and get some fortitude next game. This was like a 5-minute game. All right, shuffle it up. No pre-match, go. But now even with pre-match, at least that's right. Oversells, stop turns, Backlash, stop turns. But that opened up the whole floodgate for stall.
I'm trying to look at some stuff see if there's any good mid-match cards that came out in that release too, and
there really isn't anything.
Other than the reversals we talked about, I can't see anything else. Even No Mercy wasn't.
Yeah, exactly. There really wasn't much yet. It was when you build the Backlash deck, there really wasn't much to build. You just put it together, and you're like, well, other than your superstar specifics like Brahma Bull or whatever, or Edges with his slides or Christian with his shades, you don't really do anything. You just go, well, I don't know, study the tape, so I want to look at your hand, which can be good.
I mean, like I said, Premier WWF Superstar came out at that time too, which was a great card, but it didn't seem to really have its power until later on.
Yeah, because if you're overturning 6, you're or even to get Austin, you really want to spend a belt to get to 8 and then spend that to overturn 8. There's other things you'd rather do. You'd rather taunt for a card or something like that. But the Premier didn't really rear its head until you get to 20 superstar value and then make them. It's because it wasn't overturned. You just put them, and they ruled that that's not overturn. So you would just be able to make them unreversibly overturn. Take 20 cards and just deck them, and then they drew their starting hand. You only have to go through 30 more cards. So that's one of those cards that didn't really have a big effect until much later, when there was a bigger pre-match. You can play much more belts, and belts were becoming free with certain cards. Was that championships, stuff like that. But back then, it was just I don't want to spend a superstar card to overturn 6, possibly. It just didn't have enough yet.
With and had underrated as well.
Yes.
With adding tag team symboled cards like that, why is it to me? Because I've never played a tag team format before, so I have no idea how it actually runs, how to play it. It just seems to me like it never took off. The tag team format never took off. It became more of a side game type of stuff.
It definitely was a side game. Unlike Tornado Tag, which was a lot easier, because you'd have 2 guys.
Never played either.
Oh yeah, you need 2 guys, 2 decks, and then you need to figure out who starts, and it just wasn't as interesting. The one time I think Albert and I we ran an actual tag. We just decided to just run stall and just see what they could do. I ran Rock, he ran Crippler, and we're like, all right, if you could somehow beat me, all right, see if you can beat Crippler too. You can't, and we would just we'd stall them to death, but we would still have enough juice in the trunk to win. I mean, it was a very not actual tag wasn't that great of a format. They tried to come up with something, and it just on paper I guess it sounded fun, and in reality it just didn't work out.
Because it seemed from a lot of releases, even after that point, continue to keep putting out at least 1 or 2 tag team type cards.
Yeah, but in the end they just weren't that great. I mean, I struggle to think of cards other than Little She-Devil that that you would want to even play outside of the tag format. And Yeah, the tag format just never worked out.
Which is, you know what I like about, because you brought it to us when we played at the Wrestling Guy store. You brought in your cube format, which that's the last time I played any raw deal of any kind. And I have to say, I had a lot of fun with that. The cube format was so much fun. And you threw in cards that were tag team logoed stuff.
That you would never play, yeah, because you
never played.
Like,
that also like, fuck, I can play this with this. This is great. I'm keeping this.
Yeah. So, yeah, the tag format never really set up. But
that's a whole different topic.
Those are great.
I got to write that down. Talking about cube, that's a great topic for another day. To get people educated on the cube format and how it goes. But that was a lot of fun. But these tag team cards became, to me, more playable in that kind of format. Like I just could never see how a tag team formatted game would work. It just didn't seem like it was a lot of. In theory, it sounded like a lot of fun. It was like 4 guys playing together, it's like that, having fun, a lot of banter going on back and forth. But it just didn't seem like there's a lot of these different rules that I wasn't familiar with.
Yeah, it wasn't that fun. You wanted to play it once a year, then you're like, oh, that's why I didn't play this. It's just not that fun. It's sad. I was like one of those guys that always wanted to play as much raw deal, but tagged, I'm like, ugh, I barely want to play this. All right, the one event a year that we would have in SoCal, sure.
Was the Backlash release an attempt by Comic Imagers or the developers at the time that you think, even though you weren't a playtester at the time, to try to push tag team format type of games, or no?
I don't think they were trying to push that. I'm pretty sure WWE was like, hey, we need to push these tag teams, I guess. And I'm pretty
it was a
sure
hot time for tag teams anyways. I mean,
yeah, between like that Hardy's, Edge and Christian, yeah, those are the tag teams you're going to push if you're going to push anything. But I don't think it was about pushing the tag team format. It was just trying to push, like, I guess these guys are hot maybe, or they wanted to get them into the
seems to be the running theme with most of these releases, talking to Creed or even Eric and Nate. A lot of it was basically like it is in wrestling, period. A lot of it's political, politics crap.
Of course.
So it's like, whatever's hot that's going to get people to want to buy product. When Cena became very popular, so of course they had to put him in the Divas Overload sets like that because he was extremely getting over. So I think it was like we talked about Great American Bash, which was our first set breakdown, and we talked about why they put Lashley in because Masters wasn't like and he was supposed to be in that set, but they ended up replacing him with Lashley and just made Masters a promo card, who only had the one support card from that he shared with Carlito. But it's just like it's always about politics and who's hot and who can sell product, which I understand from a retail standpoint. I can understand that, but sometimes the fans, as we were talking about with Eric, doing the virtual stuff, you kind of want to give the players what they're asking for. They want, these new guys, even though some of them haven't really developed their characters yet, so they're not really sure, what to name cards or how to put them because they haven't really developed themselves yet. It's like, what kind of a character are they? What kind of theme should we give them in this? We don't know yet. But it's like it's almost, when Comic Images had it, it was very political because you do have your hands tied with WWE. They ultimately write the checks.
Yeah,
they cash the checks too. But they get to say, we give you a list of these 15 people we want to make, and they narrow it down to these 4. Here you go. Here's what you make right now.
Yeah.
So I get it, but it just seemed like it was all about tag teams. All these superstars that were starter decks are all tag teams.
Yeah.
So I was kind of curious and wondering why was it all about tag teams, but it sounds like it wasn't. It's just about putting out those stars because that's what they wanted at that time.
Yeah. Backlash is one of those sets, kind of like Great American Bash, where once it all sorted out, like the meta was these 3, and that's it. Like back in Great American Bash, it was Piper, Kennedy, Andre. Here, it was Rock.
Well, Great American Bash wasn't Piper.
No, he wasn't, but like that was
he was already established, dominant type of person at that time, just his ability alone.
Right before Revolution, the main 3 decks were, that's what I'm saying, Piper, Andre, Kennedy, and if there wasn't many decks like that could actually handle or deal with those 3 because that's what you knew you were going to deal with. RVD may be one of them, but that was kind of it.
Well, Mr. Pay-Per-View version anyways.
No, the regular RVD was very good against all 3 of them too.
Oh, okay.
It just depended on a lot of things, but I thought that was one of the easier ones that worked. It's just that sometimes RVD does lose.
It's funny that we talk about powers and strengths of certain. That's another whole topic by itself. It's about trying to limit or name the tiers. Who fits in what kind of a tier. But for dominant decks, it's so funny that obviously everybody talks about Andre. Everybody talks about Kennedy. Everybody talks about Piper. You throw in a little bit of RVD or Miss Pay-Per-View. But no one really talks about Eugene anymore. Like, he used to be pretty strong. Like, he was a top-tier deck.
He was, but he never, he never won. He never like won because there were certain times like he would just run to Brahma Bull, and that just would like stop the deck cold. I know he would get like Stratisfaction, but he couldn't just get off the ground. So I mean, it just wasn't as strong as like, oh, Andre just like, okay, dump your hand. All right, there. Now what? You know, like,
Yeah.
so, or no pre-match against Kennedy. Like, there's certain things you just really can't get around. So, I mean, as strong as that sounded, it got a boost in virtual that he didn't need. He got the wrong, you know, but that's another conversation.
Yeah.
Eugene was still really good, but he just wasn't as like overpowering as those. There's like just something about like Andre basically limiting your pre-match and limiting your hand, and then just like, oh no, we're just gonna give you like one card. I'll go search for two, and one of them will nerf or
kill whatever you just picked up.
Exactly.
So, yeah, it's just amazing because I used to hear a lot of people crying about how, you know, virtual neutered some of these guys, and Eugene was one of those guys that, you know, like, no, I can't with my Eugene Nick anymore because you neutered him, in addition to Piper and Andre and stuff like that. But, you know, as the developers had said, you know, Creed and those guys said, you know, whatever we took away from them, we gave them something else, other tool to kind of still make them good and playable. But, you know, people get set in their ways like, well, I'm so used to winning every time. Why can't I just keep winning with my decks like that? It's like, well,
oh yeah.
Why not build something else and be creative like that instead of net decking or, you know, getting lucky with your deck that you built or whatever the case may be. I mean, I'm a big fan of virtual only because it evened the playing field a lot, and it brought superstars that didn't do perform well. X-Pac was a perfect example. X-Pac became very good at virtual.
Oh, yes.
And it's just, you know, it's a shame that people don't really look at it from that standpoint. But, you know, Eugene, you know, didn't – I always thought that he was a really strong guy. So I guess in the time when there was no virtual slab, Eugene only had like the one card everybody had to pack was White Wedding, you know.
Eugene was very interesting in that the more superstars came out, the stronger he got. Just because, like, no matter what, he would get like new cards. Just like, oh, he gets giant headbutt. Like, does he really need to get that? Like, so in that sense,
at that point, you would think that somebody could have, you know, said, you know, this cannot be packed by Eugene. At least, you know, something, you know.
That's what they had to start doing. It just became a very interesting, like, power dynamic. In the end, they had to, like, do something about it in virtual just because he can't keep getting, like, every maneuver he can be backed by Eugene, then he backs, like, nothing but hybrids that are trademarks. And something's obviously wrong there. But,
so, and back with the Backlash, like that. So, of all of our superstars that we covered from Backlash, like, who benefited the most from virtual support?
Dudley's definitely benefited the most just because they were able to get off the ground. Let's see. Hardy,
because at Virtual One, when we started doing tournaments in the SoCal areas like that, you know, remember I was bringing like 12 to 16 of everything so people can have them to play. Like, where'd you getting this? I think you were the first one to actually go, I figured it out. He's getting it from TCO.
I know where this. Oh, okay, cool. At least I was more worried that because I didn't know you before I came to like play with your play group, and I was like, oh, I know where this is coming from. So at least I know where they're coming from, and at least I know that like you didn't just come up with like stuff out of your ass.
Yeah, I'm gonna make my own shit.
Yeah, Tony's favorite card gets like a 0 for 10, like, you know, Omni reversal for no reason. That's what you're always worried about when someone like, oh, why? Oh, because, you know, Kurt Angle's my favorite guy.
That's my favorite guy. That's why I did it. Yeah. But because talking with Creed about it, so you know, Virtual One was supposed to be that was it, just a Virtual One. It was supposed to tie everybody back up, kind of give everybody a little bit of strength that needed it. You know,
it definitely did.
A little bit. Yeah, because some guys needed it. You know, Trish Stratus needed it. You know, X-Pac needed it. You know, some of these guys needed it. But these guys from Backlash, I mean,
Jeff Hardy got a huge boost in virtual.
He got a huge boost not only just with his own superstar specific, but there were other non-superstar specific stuff that some guys like him benefited from too, right?
There were more easily played high risks, but at the same time, it was more that his pre-match just allowed him to get off the ground. Matt Hardy didn't really need much help, but, you know, easier played like perfectly executed. So, hey, an easier played high risk. That, of course, will help anyone that needs to play high risks. Dudley's, of course, they got their ECW backstage, which means they could play foreign objects much cheaper. They got their backstage themselves that allows them to just like get on the ground. So, of course, they got a huge boost. Christian didn't get very much, but then again, he was still pretty good. It's especially anything you give him, you give to Leader of Population, which was technically was a very good superstar already. They couldn't give anything to Edge because Edge is still yeah. And RGC finally got a trademark, which they've always needed. So, I mean, they didn't really get RTC didn't get much because RTC is still annoying, but RTC is just so much harder to play now because you're like, well, what do I really have a good enough raw deal knowledge base to be able to like ban how many superstars, like
well,
what
there's
is
so,
this
there's
deck
so
doing?
many of them now, so it's just hard to try to figure out like what's your key card again? I need to stop.
But it was a lot easier when there was only like 20 superstars. Now that there's like, I don't even want to even know how many
400,
now.
I think there's all over 400. I think around 400.
Like me trying to like remember like, okay, what is the key component? Is that I can't remember that. I don't have time for that nonsense. So that's why RTC just kind of like eventually fell off, just because you'd have to actually either watch the deck played or actually know all the superstar cards front and back. And then they have that rule like you have to tell me what a certain card does, and I'm like, okay, sure, I guess. Like no one wants to do that. At least I never did. People would ask me, "What does your card do?" I'm like, dude, like, come on.
Like I barely know what my cards do. How am I supposed to know what your cards do? Well, we know someone in particular that used to play in our play group that we had. It's like playing two decks at the same time when you play this person.
Yeah, that's neither here nor there, but that's okay. He just wanted to get better. He really did, and he just like it was always weird when you have a game and the guy is asking like, which card should I play, this or this? And I'm like sitting here with reversals to both, or maybe just one of them. I'm like, I really can't answer that question because I can reverse maybe one or both. So, I mean,
let me see what benefits me most.
Yeah. Well, I want to help him actually and just go, all right, try. Well, what do you need? Do you need fortitude? Do you need this? Do you want to draw cards? What are you trying to do? Because
I'm trying to win.
Yeah, exactly. That would be the answer of like, that's not exact, that's the end result. But what do you need right now? Do you need fortitude or do you want to just draw? And either way, I could stop it, but it's just like, that's the thought process. Like, what are you trying to achieve next in this turn? Are you trying to disrupt me so you can get something through? Do you need to get more fortitude? Do you just need to draw the card cycle? Just would depend.
That whole group of those particular guys have reached out to me recently, and one of them lives in New York now, and Marlon and his group of people like that. Marlon has been very supportive of everything going on with all this stuff. I mean, he's back into the game, it's like that. He's trying to learn more, it's like that. And so him and his the four ponies.
Ponies, oh yes.
But they are.
This is what you get when you try to like name yourself.
Huh?
When you try to name yourself the Four Horsemen, you don't get to be called the Four Horsemen.
Yeah, you don't get to
call you get a name bestowed upon you, and then like, all right, the Four Ponies. Sounds good.
I mean, everybody in our group, and like every group has that, I'm sure. But everybody in our group had their, we have the Four Ponies, we have the Fuck You Eds, we had, it's hilarious like that. But those guys have all like, they keep trying to ask me if I want to do like another event in 2021 and do like a one-day event. And I'm not opposed to doing that, but I just like to have numbers for people to show up and just to have fun. And I guys like him, I had to tell him, I would never be shameful of telling him. So like, listen, you used to ask us to make dates for certain things all the time, and then you wouldn't show up.
Yeah, and that kind of like defeats the purpose. Like if we circle event around you, like, all right, we'll make this date because as you said you'll come. All right, we'll make this here, and then everyone shows up except you. It kind of just like throws out all your legitimacy. We're like, well, why did we do this for you if you're just not going to show? That hurts. So, if you could have like some kind of guarantee, but nothing's ever guaranteed. So
I'm not opposed to doing it, maybe making it, the last couple of years we've taken off, we haven't done the ACMT.
Sure.
But I think in 2021 we might do it. That's a whole different topic too by itself, about just talking about the history of the ACMT, how it started, why it came about, obviously, for those who don't know. And then those first few years of like, having, some cool, WWE stars come and meet the players and stuff like that. I think it was kind of fun. But we'll talk about stuff like that. I mean, I'm not opposed to doing it. I mean, would you be up for a 2021 date?
Absolutely.
Granted,
I'll be there in a mask and a bubble, but I'm sure, like, why not?
A mask and a bubble. But, I don't have a problem with it. I just would love to get as many people as possible to come and participate. That'd be great. I don't know what kind of a venue we'd have it at. I liked having it at the Wrestling Guys door. It's kind of a nice theme there, but I don't know. I could do it. It'd be fun. It'd be real fun.
It would be fun.
But we'll think about it, and I would love to do it. So I don't know if there's anything else to cover about Backlash now.
No, there really wasn't. It was one of those very interesting. It was a very interesting time, and it was very important because pre-match and mid-match became a thing. But the main at the time was not very fun to like play if you, unless you were just playing for fun, like a side game. You're playing the side games with like you break out Dudleys and they break out Christian. All right, that's fun. Some Hardys versus like someone's Eddie Guerrero. Sure, that's fun. But as soon as you see a Rock or an RTC, it's like, oh, my head hurts.
Do we have, and again, because I'm not as knowledgeable as you guys who are much more old school, obviously. Did they have a world championship that time?
Yes.
Was Backlash the era of when they had the first world championships, or was it world champion since the first release?
The world championships ended up with after It's All About the Game, the 10, because I know that a lot of the big matches were pretty much 2-man power trip, which was the one of the decks that could beat the Rock once they got above like the Rock in fortitude value, and the Rock was still like one of the top. And RTC were still like the top, like sets and deck archetypes. She's like, ugh, gross.
But I could talk. I mean, I could ask Kreitz. I mean, I'm sure he would know off the top of his head when the first world championship was held.
Yeah, dates are not something I'm going to be able to like help you with. But I can tell you probably what happened. Which like I don't remember what year that was, and I can't remember what happened last week. But this stuff apparently like eras and like who was strong and who was not. I can tell you that because I spent the 10,000 hours obsessing over this stuff.
Well, I can tell you what's fun about doing these now is that some of these older players, older play testers, older rules people, like that, they're interested in telling their stories right now. They're really excited about talking, and what they're doing is now like, shit, now I got to go back and actually pull out all my old all my PT paperworks like that and find out what was going on during that time, and like learning about Great American Bash, just how broken Andre is now and how much more broken he actually
was before
and I didn't know that. That was a cool little fun fact to know. It's like that, but just going through the play testing schemes and finding out what was working. And again, I brought this up many times before in previous conversations about, Mike and I pretty much built Rev 4, and talking about Rev 4. It's like, that was our first and only time of developing cards and superstars. And my hat's off to the guys who do that, because it was not easy. I mean, we spent hours and hours and hours taking Post-it notes and pieces of paper and putting them in sleeves and trying to play them. Oh, okay, scratch that out. Then it's going to be this now. But it was just a lot of work. So to talk to these guys about all their notes they were taking and pulling out all this shit from, like, well, you should have seen what it used to be like. It used to be like this, and we used to have a name for it this way. It's like that, but WWE said we can't use that name, and it's just those are cool stories to talk about.
I mean, I have stuff like that from virtual where like there are certain things that no one caught. And I remember one of the times, I think something along those veins was virtual 2 is when I finally came on board playtesting. And I remember I saw like DDP going, so his diamond cutter is -10 for every superstar specific. And then I thought like, wait, aren't faction superstar specific? So I figured out a way to play diamond cutter and get into my hand first turn and it's 0. Because I thought, well, that's the way the Dark Archetype is supposed to work, right? And then I remember getting the playtesting.
You're just throwing out all factions your pre-match.
Yeah, and then they're like, as soon as like Justin saw this as my playtest, he's like, so you're bringing this to Worlds. This is a stupid pile of shit. Like a 0 for 30 that can reverse. And then I just remember, but I had just won Worlds. This is literally like a couple months later. And then I was like, so guys, why did you build it this way? Like, oh my God, you needed to tell us soon. I'm like, well, I just got into playtesting this week. And guys, seriously, like, it's not hard because you don't think about it until you give it to someone and they just break the hell out of it. It wasn't meant to ever do that.
No.
But I always thought, well, Superstar said, I assumed you meant it to work with factions. So that's why it became non-faction Superstar specific. But yeah, you just play like a bunch of factions and then, Bad Blood to get in your hand. And then you have a 0 for 30 reverse that makes opponent discard their hand. They reverse any card, even if it can't be reversed. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. That seems perfectly
the beauty of having a playtesting team, though. So that's why you have to really tip your hat to Creed. Like, he took on the brunt of almost everything, both from a graphic side, head designer sides like that. So things get missed. I mean, there were things that we did for Rev 4 that were just like, in our minds, like, well, it's working the way we want it. Yeah, but it says this and it's doing that. Did you ever think about like, holy shit, that's really broke?
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, you have such tunnel vision that like, this is the way I want it to work in this specific form. Well, did you think of everything in the outside sphere? No. I was really good at doing that, but I was never really good at design. Like, my card for design is I wanted to stop a bunch of like really hard reverse maneuvers. Literally, if you look at douchebag, at least it stopped like I literally wrote out the card to stop. It stopped bootlace, German suplex, atomic lariat, and precision haymaker. And then that became too wordy. And then they were just like, all right, how about cards with a reverse restriction? Which turns out covers a lot more. And without me trying to, it ended up being way better than I ever imagined it would be. And then, of course, we made a permanent, and then overturn damage is also stupid. So like, all right, and it goes into play permanent. Okay, that's fine. And then it became like, wow, this card is so dumb. It works for everything. And
Well,
without me trying,
as far as I know, that's an auto pack for every deck now.
yeah, I know. I mean, I wasn't trying to do that. I just really wanted to stop like cards that like, all right, if you're gonna pack, I called it anti-John when I finally got to know, like, this is all the cards you pack. So yes, the anti-John card, it's great. If you're just gonna pack another of these cards, this will stop you. All right, that's fine. One time, no big deal, because it's permanent. There's no way to get it back. All right, great. And then it just morphed somehow accidentally into stop everything that has a reversal restriction, and any rev card, which I don't even know how that got on there. And then it just did, and I was like, well, yeah, I that wasn't my original intention, but somehow, like, no one really complained because it's a one-time use, and it only gives you 2 fortitude, and that's fine. It's not the end of the world. But it's one of those, like, yeah, that you'd want that card. There's no reason not to.
It's right around the time, too, that I became sort of, like, so out of touch with all the virtual stuff like that. I mean, I know cards by names and pictures like that, but I have zero clue what they do. I couldn't tell you anything in virtual of what stuff does because I lost interest pretty much after Rev 4.
It's hard, yeah. Well,
It's
because you got
hard.
burned out probably by like
when you have a play group that's been disbanded, basically, you have one went off to become a teacher, you have another one who moved out of state, you have, jobs. I mean, that's a card that should be made itself. Life interferes, zero for 60 damage.
Yeah, that's just how that works, and there's nothing you can do about it. But it's really nice to be able to like still. I saw Ed at Comic-Con. I was like, hey, Ed. He goes, it was a surprise. I didn't want to say fuck you, Ed, because the actress that played my wife was there. But, he just like surprised, like, hey, what's up? We caught up for like a quick second.
You could have walked up to him and said, hey, fuck you, Ed.
I totally could have. But, it's really weird when a random guy comes up to you in like a crowded place to just say fuck, and you're like, just get shocked. And then he's, oh, yeah, I know you. And like,
I know you.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, it's really nice that, that we still have like that kind of relationship. I can still go up to say, we've had like this great relationship through like Raw Deal and through a lot of other things. I've had like a lot of conversations with you.
Yeah, well, I mean, the game itself has brought a lot of friendships. I talked about that with Eric, and I said that, and to Creed often, it's brought a lot of friendships. Like people I would never, I don't know if we would have you and I would ever talk if it wasn't for the game. We met because of the game.
Yeah.
I met Mike, who is my business partner now. It's like that. I met him because of the game. Here it is. It was his group. It was him and Ed and Crawford and all these guys that were together who thought that I actually ran a brick and mortar place and came driving around in Fontana in a residential neighborhood. It's like, that doesn't look like a store. Why would there be a store in the middle of all these houses? First off, and so they came to my house, and that's where they started coming to my house all the time to either buy cards, play the game, help me crack open product, and then, and here we thought that Crawford was the leader of their group and everything, and it ended up being I bonded with Mike, and Mike became my business partner. I mean, who knew? Because of this game.
Revolution, since you love Revolution, tying in Backlash to Revolution back again, it's just, this is why I thought you would be very interested in it, just because it was a very simple game. It was a much more simpler time. It's simpler time in the game where it was like 20-minute games. It was fun. Let's play it again. I mean, virtual ended up like to do all the things you want to do in virtual and play 6. It's pretty much almost is the entire game.
That is the game.
Whereas it is the game. Whereas now it's like pretty much basically was just a tiny stepping stone, kind of like Rev.
Which in a sense, by the way, when you think about it timeline-wise like that, for the evolution of actually when WWF became a company and what their gimmicks were at the time and how we would have like 30-minute matches and 50-minute matches and Iron Man matches like that, those all kind of went away when the promos all started becoming. And all of a sudden now we have all these backstage segments and a lot of talking, a lot of this, a lot of that, and then these 5-minute matches, less than 10-minute matches like that. Which is kind of what Raw Deal became. It became like these, sometimes could be good, solid 20, 30-minute matches of no crap with, pre-match stuff. And then it became like all this stuff where it became like an hour of like just pre-match and then a 5-minute match, you're done.
Okay. I remember I got so much crap from you guys, but when Steve came to the ACMT and we had like, what was it, a 2.5-hour match. And people were like, what do you guys... Yeah, and everyone's like, "What are you guys doing?" And I'm like, "I'm having the best time and the best match I've ever had," because me and Steve are like in mental warfare right now.
Yeah.
And everyone is like watching the pay-per-view and like coming up and mocking us and going, what the hell are you guys doing? And I'm like, and I've told Steve on the record, like that was one of the most fun I've ever had. Just because a guy that I know put a lot of time, a lot of effort, and knew what I was doing, and I was trying to stay ahead of him. We were playing chess. We weren't playing Raw deal.
It was a game of chess.
And it was so much fun because there's not many times where that happens. So, like, people don't like those technical matches. I love those. I don't want to watch them, but being in it, that was the most fun I've had playing Raw deal, like, ever.
Yeah.
And even if I had lost, I'd have been like, that was the greatest, that was the coolest match I've ever been a part of. So, I like how you basically just equated like the history of wrestling as it went up into that, and I'm just like, yeah, that was actually pretty cool. That was a good. I like that light bulb is when I'm like, that's actually really cool. I never thought of it that way.
It's kind of how what happened with Raw Deal now. It's like Raw Deal became all about the pre-match, the setup, and the backstage segments, and all the yak, and the talk, stuff like that, and less actual action in the rings like that. And that's what Raw Deal's become. You know, I mean, and it's just. I kind of miss. That's why I love the Revolution formats. Like you still had a pre-match, you knock it out, boom, 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 and then just kind of go through a back and forth kind of thing. Regardless if there's like the 4-2 threshold you had to get to. First one to 7 wins. It still was a little bit more of a pure wrestling match to me than it was just going in and having a lot of talk and having my backstage. Here's my whole entire backstage deck, which is
all 12 that I can play, which just became what it was, and yeah.
But it needed to be done. It's almost. I'm interested in seeing what Eric has coming up for virtual coming up, because apparently they have some really cool, interesting things to kind of change the game a bit, because they're trying to force you now to build different arsenal types instead of always packing Revolution of the Minds and Once is Enoughs and all get the F outs like that. Something a little bit different. So I'm interested in seeing what it is. I have a little bit of insight into what it is, being a part of the play testing. I still see what's going on. I barely go there,
Absolutely.
but. I'm really interested in seeing how people perceive it, how they take it. Should be fun.
I am too. Raw Deal is still fun. Raw Deal is still out there, and I'm so glad to be a part of it in some small way, especially if it's this, because I get to talk to a friend. So
yeah, absolutely, man. And with that, we can probably just wrap this one up here, I guess.
Sounds good.
So I'd like to have you back on again. We'll talk about how about you and I talk about Mania next.
Sure.
You game with Mania.
I'm down with Mania. That was a much more fun time in Raw Deal. Like everything was open.
Do your homework, buddy. Do your homework on that one, because I'm going to need it.
Sure.
All right, we'll talk again soon.
Sounds great.
All right, talk to you soon, man.
Bye.
Bye.